Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee. We're here for the fiscal year 2020 budget hearing for the fire department. I'm Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th District, chair of the committee. I'm joined by Council President Brandon Scott. To my immediate left is Vice Chair of the committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District. To my far left, Councilman Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. To my right, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, member of the committee. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We have Jeff Amoros representing Mayor Jack Young, Kimberly Rubens and Rebecca Tabb from the Office of the Council President. Chief Ford, before we begin, first, if you could just introduce your command staff.
Assistant Chief, next to me I have Assistant Chief Zimmerman, Assistant Chief Wagner, Assistant Chief Claggett. Behind me, I have Chief Roman Clark, PIO Blair. I was going to say your last name, your old last name. Skinner, I was going to see. I'd fall back to old times. Chief Mark Fletcher is over EMS. My Chief of Staff, Amy Beth Lazier, Chief Blake, as well as Jim Fisher, Fiscal. Chief Eames, he's in the Fire Marshal's office. Scott Brillman, who is over communications. Chris Case, my chief over logistics. Thank you. You guys know you know me. Chief Savannah, who's over training. Chief Reddy, who is my fire marshal. David is here. David's going to cover his own course. Lisa, who is over my human resources. I'm going to go to far left. Chief Wade, shift commander. Chief Kyle Caldwell, who is over safety. And that is my executive team. I do have other individuals here with me, though.
That's good. Who do we have from DGS here? Yep. Can you grab a seat up front? Thank you. Thanks, Steve. And David, can you please grab a seat up front? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, you're good, Bob. But, Dave and Burka and Steve, if you grab one of these seats up front. I'm sorry. My apologies. We've also been joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District member of the committee, and Michael Huber, Chief of Staff to Council President Scott. Chief Ford, before we begin the hearing, Chair Scott of the Public Safety Committee and myself sent you a letter on April 11th.
Yes.
We pointed out that the fire department faces severe challenges in staffing its paramedic units, which continues to be a driving force in the department's growing overtime issues, noting that you have not yet, as of that time, provided a complete plan on how the department will address the issue. We requested a plan which included short, intermediate, and long-term actions that could help address the issue. Similarly, we requested that in conjunction with the Department of General Services, the department provide us with a facilities update and plan for each of Baltimore's fire stations. Obviously, the conditions that we learned of at the Annapolis Road Station were very frustrating to learn about and certainly unacceptable. Before we begin, we'd like to talk about, one, a formal written plan to address short, medium, and long-term changes to address the department's chronic short and understaffing of the paramedic unit, and two, a formal analysis of the building condition of each fire station, as well as a written plan coordinated with DGS to make all necessary updates to fire department facilities.
Do you mind if we start with two first?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Your preference.
DGS.
Thank you, Chief.
Good morning. So as instructed, we've been working with fire department very closely to get the fire facilities capital assessment done. And our contract at capacity and the dollar values to do the work has been approved by the BOE as of 15th of May. We've been in touch with the with the vendor as well as the fire department. We had a meeting last week. We have about, don't quote me on the exact number, but 40 plus facilities that we just got the word that we could potentially do it all at one time, because the nature of the facilities are not as complex as a city hall type of building, and then it will require about a 2 weeks engineering and architectural assessment for the companies folks to come here. Our goal is to link this assessment and the budget timeline for 2021 for the capital planning to be in line. What our goal is to spend the summer to finish the assessments, do the analysis, create a long-term 6-year capital budget plan, and submit through DGS to planning department for 2021, as well as figuring out short-term needs that can be addressed quickly with maybe some of the current capital funding that is available. But we would like to wait until the assessment is done, because we want to use the data to tell us what needs to go first. Obviously, we're not going to do any blind planning without including the people that are actually in those buildings. We want to put together the qualitative and the quantitative data together. That allows us to put forth a more data-driven plan for the capital planning to see if we can get more money to address those issues. In the meantime, also on the operations side, talking with the fire operations and finance, we have decided to put together $500,000 from the Amos grant, previously been used to buy apparatus and medics to support the day-to-day facilities operations and make improvements and address the current situation. So that's an annual $500,000 contribution as long as the Amos grant is there, and I don't think that was ever at risk. We've been getting that money for a long time, I assume. So that's the short-term plan. Once we have scheduled the engineering assessment, and then we can actually share the dates with you. It takes about 2 weeks for them to finish the assessments and about 2 weeks to populate the software. Once that is done, we will be able to run scenarios, and scenarios can be complex as we can prioritize systems based on dollar values we get, and we can see what the improvement's going to be, and that allows us to be able to make more structured financial arguments as to what the appropriate funding level will be over the next 6, 10, and 20 years.
Chief, do you have anything else to add on this one?
No, sir.
And so just to confirm, those assessments will be completed by end of summer, I think you said?
Yes, I would, just to be safe, I would say end of September, everything would be done, because our goal is to, the capital budget is in line with the proposal with the operating budget. What we need to submit the capital budget plan to the planning department is around December. So our goal is to make sure that our plan reflects the assessment. So if we finish it towards the end of the summer, that'll allow us to be able to put together a strong proposal for the next year's capital budget. I mean, this year's already done, but that doesn't mean that we cannot reappropriate and allocate some of the future plans that we have already approved, and then shuffle things and prioritize based on the new results of the assessment.
Mr. President.
Thank you, and thank you, sir, for your hard work on this. So if you expect the analysis to be done by the end of September, so we should, the council, we should expect to receive a copy of it by, let's say, October the 1st?
Yes, exactly.
Right,
and then also, if you're interested, there's an open link that can be created for you to see as a view access to what the conditions of each facilities are, if you're interested in that. Rather than giving you a print report, we would like to give you access so you can see what's done and what the conditions are.
Absolutely. The less paper, the better.
Mr. President, Jeff, can we have that as a request? If you could send us that, is that link up live now?
The link is up live, but there's no buildings in it, but we would like to share the link. As we populate, you will see the buildings popping up in the dashboard.
Once,
October 1st, too.
yeah, and, okay, so request number 1 is the October 1st plan, and that's going to be the assessment of all the facilities.
Yes.
And then request number 2, or the second one, Jeff, I think we're at 21 and 22, is the link that was just mentioned. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you again, sir. You just talked about the $500,000 grant. Do you guys have a plan about how you're going to use make those upgrades or a list of those that you can provide so that we can see where the money actually is going and how it's going to be spent?
I'm going to defer to Steve for the operational because we've been doing inspections on those facilities. He will be able to answer better than me.
And we've also been joined by Councilman John Bullock from the 9th District. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, member of the committee.
Good morning. Steve Strickland, Department of General Services, Chief of Facilities. In the interim, while we've been waiting for all of this work to get established, we have been doing routine checks of each individual fire station, visual inspections just to get low-hanging fruit and get the things that are important right now. Through that, I would like to ask Chief Case, where he might be, to reference the $500,000 because he has specific things that are important to them that he wants to utilize that funding for. But we have been progressively going along and getting things that are glaring and that we have to get to now. And then Chief Case will speak to the grant money.
Yeah, good morning, Christopher Case, Deputy Chief of Logistics.
Morning.
This annual grant we get, Amos, we've never really used for buildings before, and we decided this year, we found out that we can use it for some building improvements. So for this closing fiscal year, we have about $500,000, and what we identified for 2 projects is a major electrical upgrade that fell short of the allotted fund from General Services, and a new roof at Engine 8 on West Lafayette Avenue. And that would, both of those 2 would probably come out right around $500,000. We haven't gotten the quotes yet.
And thank you. And then for the next year's grant, as soon as you guys identify the
Yes,
information.
Chief Ford said he would like to start with each subsequent year, $500,000 per year.
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing that I'm sorry, Chief Ford. I got an email from the VFA group that they told me that the team would be available either July 22nd, August 12th, or the early September. So we can potentially start as soon as it's late July. And even if we did the September assessment, which will be the latest date, we'll be in line to finish up.
Yeah, we would certainly appreciate anything you can do to prioritize this on the July 22nd date.
Definitely, we'll do our best.
Thank you. All right, we're good on number 2. Let's go to number 1, Chief.
Yeah, I had hoped, and I'd hoped to have the opportunity to meet with certain members of council before I did this, primarily because there are certain things that I really can't discuss in public about how we can navigate around some of these issues. Primarily because some of them deal with personnel issues, some of them deal with possible negotiations. So I can't discuss that. But I am going to share a handful of things, and I still am very, very ready and willing to meet with certain members of council to discuss where we are and some of the things I believe we could do to navigate around this. But I do have a memo prepared for you all. And I'll summarize it very quickly. The first thing I want to say is that the issue that we're dealing with overtime is not a new issue. It is an issue that's long-standing. The fire department, from the best of my research, I think it can date back to at least 3 chiefs before me, where we exceeded overtime budget each time. We've been able to navigate around that through possibly moving around funds, writing a letter to finance asking to move EMS funding to cover that cost. The challenge that I believe that we're looking at and that we're going into now is the fact that it's a handful of things, and I'm paraphrasing throughout the letter. 5 years ago, a little bit more than 5 years ago, when I put my boots down here, the fire department went to a new schedule. The new schedule was set up in order to save money long term for the city. It certainly did that in certain ways. But right after I got here and I met with my staff, one of the first things they said was, we feel like there were too many positions attrited in this process, and it compromised our fill factor. Case in point, We have 35, and I'll just use this as an example. We have 35 engines. Out of those 30, we have 35 engines, 4 shifts. With 35 engines, 4 shifts means that we ought to have 140 pump operators. But budgeted, we have 137, which means on 3 positions, we continuously call back and pay up on someone working out of class. That causes overtime. That's just one example, but there are many more examples I could give based upon that. That was one of the first things that was said to me, is that we went into and kind of undermined the fill factor. What a fill factor is, let me explain that to you. It's a commonly used term in fire and EMS where you staff over the number of seats that you have, knowing that people are going to take off, or they're going to get sick, or they're going to have FMLA, or they're going to get injured. Consequently, you have enough people staffed for those apparatus for that. It appears we did not do that. When we went into the process, about 6 or 8 months after that, I was approached by my chief of EMS, Chief Mark Fletcher, and members of his staff about the rising EMS calls. And their concern is the fact that we couldn't just keep up with them. It was outpacing us. So we sat down, and they made a recommendation of a 2-tier system. Okay, Chief, what is a 2-tier system? A 2-tier system is where we run basic life support and advanced life support. In other words, where we have paramedics and we have basics. What we did was we traded basic positions we traded paramedic positions for 2 basic positions. When we went through the process of doing that, we increased our peak time, the 9 from what we, at that time, which was our peak time, which was 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We increased the ambulances that were out in the field by, I think, over 33%, somewhere around that area. That was a fantastic thing. Initially, it took off and did well. The challenge that we had is twofold. One-fold is that call volume started outpacing that. We started increasing call volume by 14, 16, 18% over the following years, I believe respectfully. So call volume outran what we put out there in the field to maintain the call volume. Not only was I doing it to improve response time, but I was also doing it to allow the members to have some downtime, to be able to do paperwork, to be able to eat, basically, and do what they had to do. It outpaced us. During the process of going to the 2-tiered system before we stood it up, one of the things I pointed out was we need to have a fill factor for that. At the time, the city we had just agreed upon a contract in order to reduce the staffing, and the city did not want more long-term liabilities of full-time positions. So the statement back to me when it was requested was, we're not as concerned about overtime as we are concerned about long-term liability at that time. Well, initially that was not a concern because at that point we were treating positions. We had a whole bunch of positions that we had to attrit because of the contract. Well, over a period of time, those positions were gone, and now we have to call back people. So we were in the position where the call volume was still going up. We still had to call people back. Those are some of the major historical issues involved with that concern, and we have not been able to navigate around that because of that. And there's a last concern, and that's what I was talking about earlier that I need to talk to you about. There are contractual concerns. There are things that we've agreed upon in the contract that has put us in the position where some of these things happen or have tied our hands to a certain extent. There are agreements that we have made and we have to facilitate. So you asked me, okay, Chief, what are the solutions? What I am going to tell you, if you have a problem that has been there for 10 years, a fiscal problem that is millions of dollars, it is not a problem you resolve in a couple weeks or a couple days. We have, first of all, we have done research on organizations. I think, Mr. President, you recommended that we go outside and look at a third-party organization to come in. Finance has found one, Ernst & Young, and right now I'm awaiting a report from Ernst & Young, their subsidiary group who does public safety. I also have a list of about 12 organizations that have done fiscal studies or staffing studies on other fire departments throughout the country. And I have a lot of their reports. So I've had an opportunity to read through it. The first thing we've got to do is review what these organizations have done. And the reason why you do that is twofold. Well, I'm going to do two things, but I'm going to read what they've done because we need to know what we're going to get out of it. If you go into it blindly and you say, do a report, you'll get something back that may not be something you can digest or something that you can facilitate. Consequently, we need to know what they've done. The other thing is the Metro Fire Chiefs Conference is next week. Some of those organizations are going to be there. But more importantly to me, some of the chiefs that solicited those organizations are going to be there. And I will have an opportunity to ask them what they did. What would they do differently? What were their mistakes going through this process? Because once you get this report done, you own it. We own it. I own it. And I've got to make something work out of it. I do know of one organization that when the mayor got the report on television, he basically threw it in the trash. And they paid over a $250,000 for that report. So it's my business to make sure that we go through this properly and we go through it as correctly as possible. And I am going to be deliberate about it. I think it's in our best interest. It would be management malpractice for me not to do that. Because whatever we get written down, we will have to deal with it for the next 4 or 5 years.
So, Chief, I'm going to ask you to pause for a minute here. In your letter, it says you wanted to present to certain council members. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure who certain is and who certain isn't, but it says, to this date, I have not been afforded the opportunity of that confidential meeting. Is there anyone on this council who's been reached out to by fire department to have a meeting requested? Because I certainly haven't, other than the president. Is there anyone else? I just that specific question, Councilman.
No.
No, to discuss these issues. Has anyone been reached out to? Okay. I'm not sure that this comes anywhere close to meeting the intent of what we requested in our letter. So we're going to go into recess now for about 10 minutes, and we'll be back, and we'll discuss further.
I guess the committee members we should, as the committee.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Chief, first, I had mentioned that no one had been reached out to about the meetings. You brought to my attention that you asked for a meeting with me when we were at the South Baltimore Little League Parade on the stage together. I don't recall that, but you've always been forthright with me, so I can only take you at your word, and I missed it because of the insanity of being the MC with 62 different Little League teams coming down Ford Avenue. So my public apology to you for that. And I hope you will forgive me for that. That being said, this memo that you've provided today, it is my belief that this memo is inadequate and does not address what the council had asked for. In addition to that, the letter which we sent you on April 11th, and let me be clear, we're good on the facilities issue. We appreciate DGS's support. We appreciate the fact that fire is working with DGS on that issue. And we're very pleased with the course that you have laid out for how that's going to take place. I believe the two requests that we've made, which Mr. Ambrose has, will suffice. So we're good on that part. What we're not good on is the EMS and the overtime issue. We sent that letter on April 11th.
Yes.
Shortly after, on April 18th, Mr. Seneme and Mr. Ramos sent you a number of suggestions.
Yes.
Short term, I believe there were 9 of them. Medium term, there were 6 of them. And contractual, there were 6 of them. These do not seem to have been taken into consideration in your letter to us. We are going to go into recess now. We're going to ask you to come back to the committee on Thursday at 3:30 p.m. We expect a written response to the first part of the letter from Council President Scott and myself, along with a written response to everything in the BBMR memo. In addition to that, the committee, all members of the council, are going to aggregate our questions that we plan to verbally ask you so that you are adequately prepared to answer those questions. We will provide those questions to Mr. Amoros in writing or Mr. Huber. Mr. Amoros will be responsible for getting you via email by close of business today a list of all of those questions. So in terms of Thursday at 3:30 p.m., we're going to have a written response from you, having you prepared to speak through that written response, again, that addresses the first part of Council President Scott and my letter to you about EMS and overtime issues. It will address all of the 21 items from BBMR. You will be prepared to discuss that. We will have those written questions to you in advance. You can present your presentation, and then council members will ask you their questions.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Councilman, I do have the list of issues from BBMR, and I did meet with them once about it. One of the things I did point out as well is that when you hire a third-party agency, which we have intentions on doing, they're going to have a perspective of all of that. So I wanted to at least give them latitude, whomever we bring in, to do that. But I also still want to have an opportunity, because there are specific things that I cannot talk about, because the things that a lot of the things BBMR pointed out or are in comparison to the budget that we're dealing with, and not just what we're dealing with today, but our anticipated issue that's going to happen in a couple years. I'll point that out. We applied for SAFER grant, which provided us assistance for 2 units, meaning 40 people. Not this year, but next year we'll have to pay 35% of that. The following year we have to pay for all of it. I got that grant 4 years ago during the budget cycle when we were going to have to lose a unit. Well, that's coming up. What I mean is we got the grant twice. I'm not assuming we'll be able to get it the 3rd time. So even that has to be discussed in this forum. Okay? I would still like the opportunity to speak to certain individuals privately to explain my perspective about where we are and what we can do.
Absolutely. So what I'm happy to do now, we're about to go into recess until 1 p.m. for our, I'm not sure who's up at 1 p.m. I'm happy to convene a meeting right now with the vice chair and the president's senior staff, and BBMR, and you, and 1 or 2 of your senior command staff, and we can go in the president's conference room right now, and we can have that discussion about what are the things that you can and cannot discuss publicly, and what are the reasons why you can and cannot.
Yes, sir.
So if you want to select, 1 or 2 folks from command staff, and we will head back to the president's conference room right now and have that discussion.
Thank you, sir.
In the meantime, we're in recess until 1 p.m. Thank you.